Solo offshore sailing is about skill, but once the wind hits 40 knots, the sea is breaking across the deck, and you haven't slept properly in 2 days, skill stops being the whole story. Heavy weather is where the boat starts making decisions for you. Not literally, but through its stability, through its keel, through the way it tracks, through the way it reacts when you're too tired, too cold, or too late. That's why certain sailboats keep earning the trust of solo sailors over and over again. Not because they're trendy or fast in flat water, because when conditions get violent, these boats keep doing the right things. They recover, they protect themselves, they reduce workload, they buy time. And offshore, time is everything. Time to reef, time to rest, time to think, time to stay alive. We're looking at 5 proven sailboats solo sailors actually trust in heavy weather, not based on marketing or dock talk, based on what matters when the weather turns serious. Ultimate stability, structural integrity, protected rudders, encapsulated ballast, motion quality, reefing logic, tracking ability, and the one question every solo sailor eventually asks, if I'm not at my best, will this boat still look after me? Number 5 is the Vancouver 34. The Vancouver 34 gets more impressive the more practical your mindset becomes. At first glance it doesn't scream for attention, but for solo offshore work that's almost the point. This is a boat designed to make hard conditions more manageable. It carries a long encapsulated lead keel and a rudder supported by a substantial skeg. That combination matters. The long keel helps the boat track steadily in rough seas without being knocked off course every few seconds. Stable tracking means less steering correction, less drama under self-steering, less fatigue. That's exactly what a solo sailor wants. Then there's the skeg-supported rudder, which gives real protection. Offshore, rudder protection is not a bonus, it's a survival feature. Displacement is 6,350 kilograms. Ballast is 2,722 kilograms. This is a genuine blue water yacht, with enough weight and ballast to stand up to its canvas and keep a steady motion in rough conditions. Owners describe the same thing. Once the sails are balanced, the boat will virtually sail itself. That matters because a solo sailor is always spending energy, physical, mental, attention. Every time the boat takes some of that load off, safety goes up. The construction is hand-laid fiberglass with the hull-to-deck joint both through-bolted and bonded. Offshore punishment tends to expose weak joints faster than anything else. Watertight integrity is the line between inconvenience and emergency. The cutter rig is over-specified with twin backstays and a stout forestay for redundancy. As the wind rises, you can reduce sail gradually without the boat becoming unbalanced. That matters when you're doing everything alone. One of the most important traits is how well the Vancouver heaves to. For a solo sailor, survival is not always about pushing. Sometimes it's about stopping the fight. By backing the staysail and locking the rudder, the boat can drift slowly downwind at 1 to 2 knots, creating a slick that prevents waves from breaking over the deck. That allows you to go below, recover, and wait for the worst to pass. A boat that can manage itself like that is worth more than an extra half knot of performance. Number 4 is the Pacific Seacraft 37. The Seacraft 37 blends traditional offshore values with more performance and agility. What makes it special is not one dramatic feature, it's the way everything works together. This boat is serious offshore hardware, but it avoids becoming slow and overly blunt. It keeps a strong safety margin, while still giving the sailor a more responsive platform than the heaviest full-keel cruisers. The hull has moderate beam and long overhangs that create a sea-kindly motion. It avoids the hard pounding common in flatter-bottomed modern boats. Pounding is exhausting. It slows the boat. It shakes equipment loose. It destroys concentration. On a solo passage, concentration is survival currency. The angle of vanishing stability is 140 degrees, and it reaches maximum righting moment at 75 degrees of heel. It doesn't bury its rail until about 35 degrees of heel. That means the boat gives warning, remains composed, and stands up well. For a solo sailor, that's a big advantage. The boat is not waiting to punish small delays in reefing with immediate drama. Displacement is 16,200 pounds. Ballast is 6,200 pounds. This is clearly an offshore cruiser with real weight and real stability, but one with more pace and agility than the ultra-heavy classics. The underbody uses a split design with a fin keel and a skeg-hung rudder. That gives better responsiveness than pure long keel boats, while still preserving rudder protection and directional stability. It sails more actively, without abandoning the conservative offshore thinking that solo sailors trust. The cutter rig allows easy, logical, incremental sail reduction. As the wind rises, you keep the boat balanced under smaller combinations, without forcing the rig into awkward compromises. A reduced sail plan with staysail and reefed main keeps the center of effort low and central, reduces weather helm, and makes the boat easier for wind vane steering. That's exactly what solo sailors want in heavy weather. The mainsail is small enough for one person to handle without major effort. Solo sailing is not about how much sail area you can brag about. It's about how much sail you can still control when you're tired and conditions are getting ugly. Many were equipped with a single-handers package that leads the running rigging aft to the cockpit. Every time you can reef or adjust sail without leaving the companionway, you reduce risk. Build quality is conservative but intelligently refined. And here's a practical offshore advantage. The cockpit floor can be unbolted and removed, giving total access to the engine and stern tube. That's incredibly valuable at sea, because offshore reliability is not just about surviving waves. It's about being able to fix critical systems when something inevitably breaks. Number 3 is the Westsail 32. The Westsail 32 does not try to hide what it is. This is one of the most overbuilt, stubborn, and famously durable cruising boats ever produced. When solo sailors talk about boats they trust in truly ugly weather, the Westsail 32 always comes up for one reason. It is built like it expects the worst. Its design philosophy is straightforward: maximum seaworthiness, maximum hull volume, maximum survival margin. Light airspeed was never the priority, and offshore, especially in heavy weather, that trade starts making sense. Displacement to length ratio is 419, that is ultra heavy. Comfort ratio is 42.9, the highest in this group. Capsize screening formula is 1.64, which is exceptional. Once the sea state builds, those heavy ratios become assets. A DLR of 419 means huge mass for the length. That translates to momentum and heavily damped motion. The Westsail 32 does not get tossed around as violently as lighter boats. It moves slower, softer, heavier. For a solo sailor, that can make a huge difference. The less violently the boat moves, the easier it is to cook, navigate, move around below, and keep functioning. Fatigue offshore is cumulative. Anything that reduces fatigue directly improves safety. Construction is why this boat has its reputation. The hull uses 12 layers of hand-laid fiberglass, alternating woven roving and chopped strand mat. Hull thickness ranges from 3/4 inch at the top sides to more than 1 1/8 inches at the bilge. That is brute force resilience. The ballast is encapsulated, no keel bolts to corrode, no separate keel-hull interface acting as a stress point. The keel is part of the boat. That radically changes the failure profile, after hard groundings or heavy offshore impacts. The rudder is hung on the trailing edge of the full keel, giving it one of the most protected steering arrangements possible. That is classic offshore logic. Do not expose what you cannot afford to lose. The most famous real-world test is Satori in the 1991 perfect storm. The vessel was abandoned under Coast Guard orders, but the boat survived on its own and was later found on a Maryland beach in remarkably good condition. The boat was knocked down to around 90 degrees twice, and both times it righted itself within seconds. The crew could leave, the boat could not. And the boat still survived. That is an astonishing endorsement of structural resilience and self-preservation. The cockpit is very small. That sounds like a drawback until the weather gets bad. Offshore, a small cockpit is safer because it limits the amount of water the boat can carry if pooped by a following sea. Less trapped water means less dangerous weight and less disruption to recovery. The Westsail 32 sacrifices social cockpit space in favor of storm behavior. That is exactly the kind of trade serious offshore sailors respect. Number 2 is the Contessa 32. The Contessa 32 proves one of the most important truths in offshore design. A boat does not have to be big to be seaworthy. It has to be right. Designed in 1970, the Contessa 32 became legendary because of how it performed in the 1979 Fastnet race. Force 10 wins, extreme seas, 15 fatalities, multiple lost boats. And among all of that, the Contessa 32 Ascent became the only boat in its class to finish. That changed everything because it showed in brutally public conditions that the Contessa's design was not just respectable, it was extraordinary. The most important number here is the angle of vanishing stability, 156 degrees. That is exceptional. The Contessa wants to come back upright, aggressively, reliably. That is one of the biggest reasons solo sailors trust it. After the Fastnet inquiry, technical comparisons showed a half-tonner design from the same era with an AVS of only 117 degrees. That difference tells the whole story. Length overall is 32 feet. Beam is 9.51 feet. Displacement is 9,520 pounds. Ballast is 4,500 pounds. Ballast to displacement ratio is 47.37%. Compared with the heavier boats here, the Contessa is not the softest ride. Its comfort ratio is lower, it is wetter, it is more compact. But in return you get a narrow, low-profile, deeply ballasted offshore weapon with astonishing positive stability. It has been called a submarine with sails. Low freeboard means you will get wet, but it also means less windage, less profile for the sea to hit, and a hull that slips through conditions instead of fighting every wave. The underbody is a smart balance. A thin keel combined with a skeg-mounted rudder gives more responsiveness than a long, full keel, but still protects the rudder and keeps the steering conservative for real offshore work. Construction is equally convincing. The hull is heavy GRP to Lloyd's standards. The deck is solid GRP too. No core, no balsa, no plywood. That eliminates the long-term risk of core rot and deck delamination. For old offshore boats, that is a massive advantage. The mast is keel-stepped, which gives extra security under knockdown loads. Willie Kerr described Ascent charging over 40-foot seas during Fastnet, taking a knockdown that brought some water into the cockpit, but righting itself so fast the crew never felt real loss of control. That captures the whole appeal of the Contessa 32. When conditions turn violent, the boat reacts correctly and immediately. No hesitation, no drawn-out recovery, just back on her feet and moving again. Kerr later took ascent over 100,000 miles, including Antarctica and the Arctic, often single-handed. That proves the boat is good at enduring years of hostile conditions. Number 1 is the Rustler 36. If you ask which of these 5 boats has become the modern benchmark for solo heavy weather trust, the answer is the Rustler 36. This is the boat that keeps showing up wherever the weather gets serious enough to expose weak design. Designed in 1980, the Rustler 36 has become the dominant reference boat in the retro offshore world, especially through the Golden Globe race. That matters because the Golden Globe race strips everything back. No modern technological cushion, no easy intervention. The boats that do well there are the boats that can take care of themselves for a very long time in very hard places. The Rustler 36 has emerged as the standout. Start with the number that grabs every offshore sailor: angle of vanishing stability, 157 degrees. That is superb, one of the highest here. It means the boat has a profound resistance to remaining inverted after a capsize. That alone makes it extremely attractive for regions where a full roll is a realistic threat. Length overall is 35 feet 4 inches. Beam is 11 feet. Displacement is 16,850 pounds. Ballast is 7,620 pounds. Ballast to displacement ratio is 45.34%. Displacement to length ratio is 384.56. Comfort ratio is 36.18. That is a powerful offshore profile. Heavy displacement, high ballast ratio, narrow enough beam for strong recovery, good comfort, excellent stability. This is exactly the kind of package solo sailors trust when conditions go beyond merely unpleasant. The heavy DLR is especially important in head seas. A lighter boat tends to lose speed and rhythm when it slams into large waves. The Rustler's mass helps it maintain momentum. That makes the boat easier to manage offshore, not just faster, more composed, more predictable. Despite its traditional form, the Rustler 36 remains a capable passage boat when pressed. Construction is a huge part of the trust factor. The hull is solid GRP. That matters because solid laminate avoids the underwater delamination risks associated with cored hulls in high-impact offshore use. But the real headline is the keel, encapsulated lead ballast integral to the hull structure. No external keel bolts, no keel hull joint vulnerable to corrosion or catastrophic separation. That one feature alone is enough to make many offshore sailors sleep better. Keel loss is one of the most terrifying failures in sailing. The Rustler 36 is designed specifically to avoid that. The rudder is supported by a robust skeg. The boat protects what it cannot afford to lose. Then there is the race record. In the 2018 Golden Globe race, Jean-Luc Vandenheide used his Rustler 36 to lead through the Southern Ocean, surviving multiple storms with only minor shroud damage. But the most dramatic proof came from Susie Goodall's Rustler 36. In the South Pacific, in about 60-knot winds and 13-meter seas, the boat was pitched end over end. The rig was destroyed. The interior was trashed. Goodall was thrown violently inside and knocked unconscious. And yet, after the boat righted itself, the hull and deck remained intact and watertight. It remained a survival pod. It kept the sailor alive. That is the final level of offshore trust. Not a boat that never suffers damage, a boat that still protects you when the damage is severe. What all 5 boats teach you: solo heavy weather sailing is not about one magic feature. It's about a chain of correct decisions. A boat must recover from extreme angles. It must keep its appendages protected. It must manage sail reduction logically. It must work with self-steering instead of constantly fighting it. It must move through rough water without destroying the sailor, and it must stay structurally coherent when conditions go from hard to violent. That is why these 5 keep coming up in serious offshore conversations. They are not random favourites. They are boats that solve the right problems. The Vancouver 34 gives you directional stability, cutter rig manageability, and excellent heaving-to behaviour. The Pacific Seacraft 37 gives you a more responsive sailing experience without compromising offshore credibility. The Westsail 32 gives you enormous comfort of motion, massive laminate strength, and a reputation for indestructibility. The Contessa 32 gives you one of the most convincing small boat heavy weather survival records ever created, and the Rustler 36 gives you the strongest overall package for modern solo heavy weather trust. Because in the end, offshore sailing alone is not about choosing the boat that feels best on a sunny afternoon. It is about choosing the boat that still behaves correctly after fatigue, fear, and bad weather have stripped everything else away. These 5 boats have earned that trust the hard way, through ratios, through structure, through storm tactics, through real survival stories, and through the one thing that matters more than anything else offshore. When the sea gets ugly, they keep looking after the sailor. If you've sailed any of these boats alone in heavy weather, or you know sailors who have, I want to hear what actually held up and what surprised you. That real-world experience is worth more than any spec sheet. And if you want more straight talk about boats that perform when conditions get serious, subscribe.